Takuto was a boy who had been suffering from a terminal illness since childhood. His entire life was confined between hospital rooms and computer screens. That very screen was his greatest support, a civilization-building strategy game called Eternal Nations. Every night, Takuto created his imaginary world and every day prepared new plans for his kingdom. But one day, after he restarted the game, having completed all his achievements, he silently said goodbye to this world. He felt as if his soul was slowly sinking into darkness. And then, when his eyes opened, he found himself sitting on a stone throne in the middle of a dense forest. There was silence all around and only confusion in his mind. Then, a familiar figure appeared before him. It was none other than Atu, the Sludge Witch, his favorite character from Eternal Nations. Takuto immediately recognized her, the same witch with whom he had started the toughest journey. From the Kingdom of Ruin and Evil Minogra, Atu was a character who was extremely weak at the beginning, but absorbed the abilities of enemies she defeated and eventually became the most powerful. Now Atu stood before him and called him her king. At first, Takuto thought this was some role-play situation, but Atu smiled and said, "You don't need to think so much. I know everything. Your name, your life, even the fact that you have never touched real grass." She said that Takuto was the pro among pros who had completed the game on nightmare difficulty. Hearing this, Takuto was stunned, because Atu not only knew he was a player and she was just a character, but she remembered every game they played. His playstyle, all his dialogues, and even the things he had said to her alone through the screen. There was a sparkle in Takuto's eyes. His heart was beating fast. To see and talk to his favorite character face to face, this was nothing less than a miracle for him. But Atu smiled and said, "I'm even happier than you." Takuto asked hesitantly, "Is this heaven? Did you summon me here?" But Atu shook her head and replied, "No, I was summoned here too. And as for this place, it feels like we have entered the world of Eternal Nations." Saying this, Atu suddenly knelt down and took Takuto's hand. There was determination in her eyes. "Now that we are both here, the reality of this place doesn't matter. We should team up again and build a new civilization just for us." Takuto was speechless. He had no words. Atu smiled and pulled him down from the throne and said, "We have conquered the world many times in the past. Now consider this a brand new beginning." This thought pleased Takuto greatly. He said seriously, "If that is so, then Atu, help me. Serve me so that we can build a glorious civilization." Atu happily agreed, acting like a badass witch, and pledged loyalty to her king. But the next moment, both of them became embarrassed and laughed at their own cringe-worthy dialogues. Then Takuto said, "You already know what our first work in Minogra is." Atu immediately nodded. "Yes, we will become shut-ins and hide our existence from the rest of the world." After that, Takuto used his emergency skill and summoned a giant-sized bug that went out to scout the surrounding area. He explained that, like in the game, their core rule here is to completely hide their presence early in the game. Such scouts are perfect for gathering information without revealing themselves. Takuto gave the bug a command and it immediately set off on its mission. Atu looked at him in surprise. How did all this happen so smoothly? This is a completely new world. Takuto said calmly, "I can share the bug's vision, just like in the game, but summoning it used half my mana. Now the best step is to build our starting settlement." Takuto took a deep breath. "I wish I had a little more mana, so I could summon a fighter who could defend us, but right now, it's not possible." Hearing this, sadness appeared on Atu's face. She said in a low voice, "I am so weak right now that I can't even protect myself, let alone you." Takuto kept watching the surroundings through the bug's eyes. There was nothing but dense forest. Atu became silent and sad because she couldn't help at this moment. But then, Takuto smiled and said, "Having you with me is enough for me." Hearing this, Atu's face lit up and the sparkle returned to her eyes. Then the bug moved forward and reached a group, some poor and tired dark elves. Atu immediately said, "This is good news for us. Dark elves are a neutral species, although they lean slightly toward neutral evil. Their kingdom is also considered Loki neutral evil." But this news caused worry on Takuto's face. Questions arose in his heart. Is this really the world of Eternal Nations? If there is another civilization nearby, my kingdom could be destroyed as soon as it starts. Atu placed her hand on his hand and said, "If danger ever comes, we will run away together." Takuto looked at her and smiled softly. "You are absolutely right." He decided to keep an eye on the Dark Elves and continue scouting. The bug showed that the Dark Elves were performing their small chants and celebrations. But suddenly, a group of Dark Elves arrived right where Takuto and Atu were present. There was shock on both sides. As much as the elves were scared to see them, they were equally scared. Atu immediately stood in front of Takuto, with determination in her eyes. If my master is threatened even a little, I will stake my life. Meanwhile, the Dark Elves' leader, Jia, had gone out to find food for his people. His assistant had already warned him. We shouldn't come to this forest. Legends say that something extremely evil is sealed here. But Jia shook his head and said, I cannot let my people die of hunger. Even if the legends are true, we must move forward. And as this thought ran through his mind, his gaze suddenly fell on Atu and Takuto. At that moment, he felt as if he was standing before an avatar of evil. Takuto's form looked to him like a black silhouette, and at that very moment, Jia's heart accepted that all those terrifying stories about this forest were not lies. Jia's heart was pounding heavily. He felt that if a single mistake was made here, his entire clan could be wiped out. So he immediately kneeled down and introduced himself before Takuto. His followers did the same. Then Jia tremblingly apologized to Takuto, "We have trespassed into your territory." Suddenly, Atu crossed her arms in a gangster-like body language and said with cold eyes, "Good, you know your place." Her voice had such dominance that the entire group was intimidated. Then she asked, "Tell me, why have you Dark Elves come here?" Jia began a long sob story to gain sympathy, but Atu got irritated and said, "Get to the point." Her tone was so terrifying that Jia was stunned. He immediately said, "We have been banished by the council and our persecution still continues today." Then Takuto asked coldly, "So, have you suffered a lot of hardships?" Jia froze in panic. But when Atu said, "Answer, this is the king's question," he tremblingly said, "Our clan was given an unjust punishment. We were forced to take refuge in these cursed lands, but our food supply ended a week ago. Now my people are starving." Jia's mind revolved around the hardships of his people. They only wanted to live peacefully, but now they were dying of hunger. His heart trembled. Would Takuto also show cruelty toward them? But his surprise knew no bounds when Takuto conjured some apples and threw them towards them, saying, "Taste these, they are quite delicious." Jia had never even seen apples before, so he was doubtful, but his followers could not wait and immediately began to gobble them up. How sweet these are! The sparkle returned to their eyes. Then Takuto also summoned some pears, and Jia was completely stunned. Atu said in a cold voice, "Why? Won't you eat the fruits that my master has given you so graciously?" The dark elf immediately bowed and said, "There are more people in my tribe, especially children. They are hungry. I want to feed them first." Takuto's eyes softened. He looked at Jia with compassion, and then suddenly began to summon a massive amount of food from the air. Atu's mouth dropped open. She was looking at Takuto in horror, and Jia stood in sheer shock, as if a deity was performing a miracle before his eyes. Jia, like the Dark Elves, had always faced discrimination. People believed they were connected to the dark side, so no one ever helped them. For the first time, someone showed mercy, and now questions filled Jia's eyes. She asked Takuto, "Who exactly are you?" But Takuto calmly said, "Take this food to your people." Jia and her followers returned to their camp. For the first time, everyone had full stomachs, and satisfaction appeared on their faces. But Jia didn't tell anyone where the food came from. That night, as Jia sat alone near the campfire, the clan elder approached him. Deep curiosity shone in the elder's eyes. "The fruits you brought today, I have never seen their like in my long life. Their taste was better than any fruit I've known. Tell me, where did you find them?" Hesitating, Jia told him everything, how he had met a legendary evil being in the forest. The elder's eyes widened. "So you met the King of Ruin, the same one mentioned in our ancient texts. It is said that when this world becomes too full, the King of Ruin will come and destroy everything to bring a new beginning." Jia felt that Takuto fit this description, but the truth was he didn't understand a single word Takuto said and mostly acted based on Atu's gestures and hints. The elder was puzzled by this part. He asked, "Did you give him anything in exchange for the food?" Jia shook his head. "No, I gave nothing." The elder said seriously, "No evil being ever shows mercy without a price." But Jia still believed, "No, he is kind. He understood our suffering and pitied us." Hearing this, the elder grew angry. "How can you use such words for an evil being?" The argument went on for a while, but then the elder admitted that Jia had done whatever he could for his clan. After that, Elder Molter announced, "I will speak to the Dark King myself. Maybe then we can have the peaceful life we have always dreamed of." Meanwhile, Atu scolded Takuto in anger. "You didn't even have enough mana, yet you summoned so much food. If you keep doing this, we both will be in danger." But as soon as Takuto spoke softly, "Don't be angry with me, Atu. I need you." Atu's face turned red, and awkwardly laughing, she returned to her tsundere witch act. The next day, Jia prepared again to meet Takuto. Elder Molter asked if he was truly ready to face the King of Ruin. He believed that since they had already accepted Takuto's charity, they must be ready to pay any price. Gia immediately objected and said Takuto had never said such a thing, but Molter replied that it is a law of nature. Evil beings always ask for something in return for their good deeds. Still, he accepted that for survival, they must depend on Takuto because there was no other safe place for them. Together they decided to meet Takuto, unaware that all along Takuto's insect scout was watching them. Takuto immediately called it back, and when he learned the Dark Elves were coming, he only wanted them to quietly take the food he had prepared the day before and leave. He got nervous and said he couldn't communicate well, so negotiating would be difficult for him. Atu said she would handle everything, and this would also show the Dark Elves that their king does not even consider it necessary to talk to them. A little later, Molter and Gia arrived there. The Elder Elf greeted Takuto and thanked him through a ChatGPT-generated salutation for providing food to their people. Then he asked if he could know the name of the person who helped them. With Takuto's permission, Atu proudly revealed his name and declared him the King of Ruin. Both Dark Elves were stunned. Their fears had been confirmed. After that, Atu told them to take the food and leave because it wouldn't last long. But Molter said he wanted to repay Takuto's kindness and asked, "What can we give him in return?" Atu replied coldly that they didn't have anything to satisfy their king, so they shouldn't even try. Then she asked if they really had anything valuable. Molter hesitated because they had nothing left. Atu glared at him and asked if he was plotting something. Molter broke out in a nervous sweat, and Takuto immediately realized the negotiation was going very badly. He called Atu over to explain his approach, but Atu angrily snapped. In her opinion, Takuto was being too soft. She said these two losers didn't know how to negotiate, and if this continued, they would only become obstacles in his path. She even suggested it would be better to kill them and hang their heads on the base pillars. Takuto got irritated and said she was beginning to think like that Austrian painter again. Calmly, he explained that the Dark Elves just wanted to live peacefully together. They wanted to repay because taking without exchange was hard for them too. He suggested that they should take payment from them according to their capacity. Giving food for free was not right. This would also improve their relationship. Atu was reluctant but could not deny his reasoning. She informed the elves that their king had accepted their offer. Hearing this, relief spread across Molter's face. Both Takuto and Atu understood why he had been so nervous. He had mistaken Takuto for a typical evil being. Atu rebuked him, but herself got confused about what to ask in return. Then Takuto had an idea and said they should gather information from the elves about the outside world. Molter was very happy to hear this and swore to tell Takuto everything about the outside world in detail. Atu set a condition that after this, they must leave the forest immediately with their entire tribe. Molter and Gia were shocked on hearing this. They said they wanted to settle here under Takuto's mercy, but Atu scolded them and warned that if they wanted to survive, they should not get greedy. Gia tried to argue, but Molter silenced him, saying they must follow the king's orders. The two started to leave, but Takuto felt guilty about sending them away. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him. He asked Molter and Gia to become his citizens. Both elves were stunned by this, but Atu was the most shocked. She asked Takuto what he was doing. Takuto reminded her of the game's refugee system, where different species could become citizens. He explained that since the Dark Elves are a neutral species, they would easily adapt to the kingdom's evil attributes and coexist with the other species. Atu was still doubtful because, in her experience, evil-aligned species often had ongoing conflicts. Takuto reminded Atu how creepy their main species, the homunculi, looked, like humans broken into pieces and wrongly put back together. He said they couldn't stay among them all the time. At this thought, the terrifying image of the homunculi appeared in Atu's mind, and she immediately agreed with Takuto. Then she turned to the two elves and said Takuto intended to soon establish a kingdom here and was ready to accept them as citizens, provided they took an oath of service to him. Molter was startled and asked Atu what would happen to them if they became Takuto's citizens. Atu clarified that they would become evil beings, but said with a slight smile that being evil was not as bad as people think. Sometimes it could even be more fun. Soon, Takuto and Atu arrived at the Dark Elves settlement, where everyone was ready to welcome them. However, fear was so intense that many weak elves fainted just at the sight of Takuto. Takuto took his place on the throne, and Atu announced to the elves that they were now going to become citizens of this kingdom. She asked Takuto one final time for permission, and as soon as he nodded, the elves were officially accepted into the kingdom. Atu congratulated them, saying their survival and safety were now guaranteed by their new king. Gia felt everything was too easy and that he did not feel any change. But as soon as he said this, intense hatred erupted within him and the other elves. Suddenly, memories of all the people who had tortured their race came flooding back, igniting a fire of revenge in their hearts. Two normal elves who accompanied them were scared to see this transformation. Seeing everyone suffering, Takuto asked if they were alright, and tears welled up in Jia's eyes because for the first time, someone truly cared about him and his people. The Dark Elves cheered for Takuto, tears in their eyes. Takuto was quietly overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. A few days later, Molter gave him a map of the continent. As soon as Takuto looked at it, he literally crashed out. Atu, worried, asked what happened. Takuto showed her the map and said, "Look at how shitty our starting position is." Seeing the continent map, both their faces hardened. Two large and powerful civilizations already existed there. On one side, the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, a human nation worshipping the god Arlos, clearly aligned with good. On the other side, Elnan, an alliance of elementals where nature-worshipping elves lived, also firmly on the good side. Atu became anxious. If these two discovered their small kingdom, they would immediately be erased. Both crashed for a while, but Takuto regained composure and said that as long as they remained undiscovered, they could slowly become stronger. He reminded them that in the game, their main species, the homunculi, was rather dumb in research, so real-world progress was slow. But now, with Dark Elves, research and intel work would improve. Soon after, a delegation of Dark Elves arrived, this time with Jia and his assistant Emily. Jia explained Emily was a smart nerd who knew a lot about other kingdoms and their tactics, so she would prove to be a great asset. Atu said with dignity that the king was pleased with their dedication, and now they must take on important roles, the ones Takuto wanted. First, Atu assigned Molter the duty of internal affairs, noting she had heard Molter knew magic and had high expectations. Then she made Jia the head warrior of Managra and told him to build a strong army so they could defend themselves. The entire soldier recruitment was left to Jia, who immediately got hyped and said he would kill all enemies and hang their heads as trophies. Takuto was grossed out by this and said war was barbaric and destruction should be the last resort. Atu explained to Jia that their king preferred peace, so he must always keep that in mind. This made Jia even more confused. What is a king of ruin doing caring about peace? Molter mocked Jia, saying he had no brains, just muscles, then stood up and said he would be more helpful. The whole scene became a strange mixture. Jia's warrior enthusiasm, Molter's pragmatism, and Emily's quiet intelligence clashing. Takuto silently watched them all and planned inside. He knew any big problem had to be solved not by brute force, but by strategy, research, and covert scouting. He decided that Managra must be built so that through diplomacy, stealthy intel gathering, and selective recruitment, they could slowly secure their space. And the Dark Elves, especially smart minds like Emily, would be their true advantage. Jia took it as a direct challenge and told Takuto that since he was young and strong, he could work more without rest. In reality, both were just trying to get their big evil daddy's attention, but Atu didn't understand this and thought they were pure workaholics. She then asked Takuto if they should be given some resource collection mission. Takuto calmly suggested ordering them to beautify the terrain and build some houses. Atu immediately told Molter to collect timber for house construction, but emphasized that most of the forest must remain intact. Molter quickly agreed, saying Dark Elves were forest dwellers anyway, so the work was natural for them. Takuto added that where trees were cut, new ones should be planted, i.e. reforesting. The elves were confused by this term. Takuto instantly realized their civilization was not advanced enough to understand concepts like reforesting. He asked if they knew about military magic or the 6 major elements. Molter said they only knew about 4 elements, and Emily clarified that she had never heard of any country using military magic. Takuto and Atu realized this world was far more primitive than they had imagined. But that was actually good for them, because if they advanced magic technology, they could soon surpass other nations. Takuto was genuinely surprised since he had thought growing anything here was impossible. Then he realized if he could produce Earth's fruits here, maybe he could produce other things too. To test this, he created a coin, and it succeeded. Then it dawned on him that he could materialize gunpowder and other science-based things here. This realization was a game changer for him. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, activity was stirring. Saint Selena, leading a squad of knights, had arrived in the snow-covered foothills where nearby villages were threatened by monsters. As goblins charged at her, Selena raised her staff and incinerated them with her holy flame. The flame dissolved into the clouds, and when sunlight scorched the ground, flowers bloomed there. The knight captain told his squad that Selena's ability burned away monsters filled with evil and replaced them with flower beds. This was why their elves had a friendly relationship with her kingdom. Afterward, Selena told the cardinal that she should send Paladin south south because she'd recently received an omen about something terrible happening in the cursed forest. The cardinal flatly refused, saying the cursed forest was very far in the continent's corner and sending paladins required higher-ups' permission. Angry, Selena said that if he wouldn't send them, she would go there herself. The cardinal tried to argue but eventually relented and promised to send some soldiers using his personal authority. Meanwhile, Takuto and Atu were busy developing their territory. Houses were being built for the Dark Elves and a temporary throne room had been set up where Takuto sat on his throne eagerly awaiting meetings and conferences with important kingdom citizens. Just then, Molter, Gia, and Emily arrived. Atu immediately said they should start their first council meeting. Before the meeting began, Emily had a gift for Takuto, an outfit. Takuto liked it since his old clothes had become dirty. He thanked the elves, though, strangely, they saw no big difference in his appearance. Still, they accepted Atu's confident claim that Takuto looked magnificent in the new outfit. Crow. The meeting started, but Takuto was busy fanboying over his new look. Atu decided to lead the meeting herself and consult Takuto whenever needed. Takuto was perfectly happy with this arrangement. At the start, Molter asked what types of buildings they should build first. Atu said they must begin with food production facilities. She then brought out a strange and creepy-looking plant and said it would be their main food source. The elves recoiled in disgust and asked Atu what it was. She explained it was the flesh plant, unique to their civilization. This plant produced meat that tasted like human flesh and was very nutritious. The elves were stunned and said they didn't eat humans. Atu explained that the flesh plant was only for the starting phase, and soon other types of food would be available. She added that alongside farms, they would need storehouses and management sheds. Emily immediately took charge of this work. The next agenda point was research. Atu explained that acquiring advanced technology was vital for small nations. Molter asked which technology they should focus on. Atu said, magic technology. Takuto visibly got excited, and Molter promised as a mage he would do his best. He further asked what kind of magic technology to pursue. Atu said, military magic. She explained that standard attack magic could target only a limited number of people, but advanced military magic could destroy entire cities and even alter the terrain to their advantage. Atu ordered Molter to gather talented mages and start research immediately. Molter became very hyped at the idea of creating new spells. Next came military strategy. Gia got extremely enthusiastic as it was his topic, but Takuto immediately said they would not invest heavily in the army for now. Atu added that armies were expensive to maintain and produced nothing in peacetime. Gia argued that they currently did not have enough power to protect their king, so focusing on the military was necessary. Molter supported this, saying that as leaders of the Dark Elves, both he and Gia had bounties on their heads, and enemies could attack their kingdom. Takuto understood their concerns and offered a new solution. He would create a hero to defend the kingdom. Atu agreed, saying creating a hero was expensive but they required no maintenance, so heroes were perfect for their current needs. The elves didn't know what a hero was, so Atu explained that heroes are extremely powerful beings who serve directly under the king. There are certain conditions to summon different heroes, but she was confident they would soon summon their first hero. Takuto was super excited by this. He thought that most work in this world required mana, and a kingdom could only collect mana from its people. The happier the people were, the more mana they could gather. Takuto resolved to make his kingdom the happiest place on the planet. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, a junior paladin named Lonius was chosen as part of the investigation team to be sent to the Cursed Forest. Along with him was senior paladin Vertel, whose favorite pastime was annoying Lonius because Lonius was very straight-laced and formal. Vertel complained that sending such a small investigation team, only 2 paladins and some mercenaries, was risky. He said the church should pay more attention to Selena's prophecy. Lonius agreed but knew it was impossible to guess what the higher-ups were thinking. He also knew that if they succeeded, they would receive a great reward, but if they failed, all the blame would fall on him. Back in Minagra, Takuto inspected the progress of his civilization. He felt nostalgic because he had seen the starting phase on the screen thousands of times, but now he was seeing it firsthand. Emily showed him around, explaining that Dark Elves are experts at building tree houses. However, housing construction was slow because they were focused on the flesh trees. Flesh trees were growing well, and management and storage facilities had also been built. Emily added that they had found a freshwater spring nearby and were checking whether they could draw water from it. As for magic research, Molter and other mages were working hard in the newly built research building. Takuto felt very happy hearing this, and even more so when he learned that the elves were taking initiatives, like searching for water sources themselves. He was truly glad that the exhausted and troubled elves who had first arrived were now looking happy. When he shared this with Emily, she burst into tears of joy. Takuto freaked out seeing her break down, but Emily soon calmed down and continued the tour. She showed Takuto and Atu the flesh tree farm and said that thanks to the tools Takuto had provided, they expected their first harvest soon. Then she took them to the water source the elves had found. But this time the vibe was completely different. The water had turned dark and Emily became disappointed, thinking the water was now unusable. Before Atu could explain, Molter and Gia also arrived to check on the water. They agreed with Emily that the water didn't seem usable anymore. But then Atu took a sip and said the water was completely safe to drink. She explained that the place looked dark and gloomy because it had become part of Minagra, a feature called cursed terrain. Takuto told the elves to take a deep breath, and suddenly they felt their minds clear and bodies fill with energy. Atu explained that cursed terrain gave an advantage to evil-aligned beings while penalizing neutral and good-aligned ones. Since the Dark Elves were now part of it, having become evil beings, the water was perfectly safe for them. Gia confirmed this by drinking the water himself. Atu then said the entire forest would soon be part of the cursed terrain. But Takuto thought this might be problematic, as cursed terrain looked very different. Molter agreed, saying when the whole forest turned so dark, enemies could easily spot them. Gia again suggested building an army, but Takuto and Atu assured him they were going to summon a hero, Ko. Molter said he still wasn't clear on what exactly a hero was. Atu decided to explain with an example. Suddenly, dark tentacles emerged from her back, and she easily cut down nearby trees. Then she revealed that she herself was a hero. Even though she currently had only 1% of her full power, she could still defeat entire armies. Takuto boasted before the surprised elves that heroes were truly awesome, and they grew stronger over time, even without doing anything. But he quickly changed the topic and told Atu that there was no need to cut trees just to show power, and that she would have to clean up the mess later. The elves were genuinely amazed and said Takuto was great because he had such powerful subordinates. They decided to build him a grand palace. Takuto initially refused, saying he didn't need one yet, but the elves firmly insisted that their king couldn't live in simple houses like them. Atu also explained to Takuto that having a palace would make people happier, so he should allow it. Finally, Takuto gave permission and said that one day he wanted a flying fortress, but for now a normal palace would suffice. At the same time, an investigation group led by Lonius and Vertel was advancing toward the southern cursed forests. Vertel was still unhappy with the small size of the group. Lonius replied that for now this was all they could get because most forces were busy dealing with disturbances in the north. Evil-aligned species had appeared there, attacking and looting towns, so most of the Empire's firepower had been diverted northward. The mercenaries suddenly said those who had gone north were in a very tough situation. They felt lucky not to have gotten that job because although the pay was good, a witch was involved and they did not want to face her. At night, Lonius out of curiosity asked a mercenary named Bargo about the witch. Bargo said rumors were that the witch was the real cause of all the problems in the north. Lonius refused to believe it, saying no single person could be responsible for so many monsters. Bargo agreed and said it must be the work of some cult, but Vertel immediately silenced him, warning that he might bring bad luck on everyone. Suddenly, Lonius got angry because Vertel was completely drunk. He lectured him, saying they were servants of God and were not allowed to drink. But Vertel was ready to debate religious texts with him. Then Vertel ignored Lonius, started flirting with the waitress who was bringing him more alcohol. Afterward, Bargo asked Lonius why 2 paladins had been sent so far south. He feared there might be another witch involved. If so, he wanted to leave the mission with his men before things got dangerous. Lonius said he didn't know, but then Vertel revealed he had already gathered some information from the waitress. Recently, a large group of dark elves had fled into the cursed forests, and perhaps the higher-ups just wanted to deal with them. Bargo felt relieved hearing this and admitted they should handle the dark elves quickly because they were extremely skilled in assassinations and curses. Lonius also agreed that leaving dark elves unchecked would soon become a threat, but Vertel told him to chill out. He said it was just a recon mission, and if things got violent, they would run rather than fight. However, Lonius was firm in his belief that wherever evil appeared, it was their duty to eliminate it. He said a paladin could never run from his duty. Vertel explained that instead of risking their lives every time, they should only fight when the situation demanded it. He reminded Lonius that he had a family at home, and so did everyone else on the mission, so they needed to be more careful with their decisions. In Minagra, the first harvest from the flesh trees was ready and placed in the middle of a massive altar. Takuto stood before the pile of fruits, with all the dark elves watching intently, wondering what would happen next. Takuto began infusing his mana into the fruits and suddenly transformed into a giant bug. The elves could hardly believe that Takuto had created life from just a pile of fruits. They praised him, saying this was barely 1% of his true power. Atu told the elves that with their devotion, Takuto would become even stronger and perform many miracles. Everyone cheered. Later, Takuto returned to his throne, feeling relieved that he had managed to create a bug monster in exchange for food. This was a game feature, but he still didn't understand how it worked in this world. Atu said they didn't need to think too much now because they had discovered how to create creatures to serve the kingdom. Then she told Takuto it was time for the next step. Takuto agreed and said that once enough mana was collected, he would summon a hero. Excited, Atu asked who he planned to summon. Takuto replied that he wanted to call Isla the Queen of Insects. Atu agreed it was a solid choice. Takuto explained that Isla could buff all insect-type monsters and make them capable fighters on the front lines. She could also produce larvae that would perform small tasks, providing support on both fronts for the kingdom. Atu was pleased that Takuto had made such a well-thought-out decision. Takuto said he had no other choice because other heroes were too unhinged. Atu also agreed, knowing the others would need years of therapy. Takuto said he hoped to summon them someday, but not yet. Meanwhile, Lonius and his team had reached the Dark Continent and soon faced their first opponent, a hill giant. Lonius started commanding the mercenaries to support him, but Vertel said it wasn't necessary. He insisted he could handle the monster alone, as they didn't have time to waste. Acting alone would speed things up and prevent others from getting in his way. Vertel quickly moved toward the hill giant with his sword drawn as his company watched. He enchanted his sword with holy power. The hill giant patiently waited to finish him off and then counterattack, but Vertel easily blocked the giant's heavy club and cleanly sliced it off with his holy sword. He then leapt onto the monster and delivered multiple blows, knocking it down without giving it a chance to fight back. After killing the giant, he returned to his troops, and Lonius praised him, saying the mission would be easy with Vertel on their side. But Vertel disagreed, which worried Lonius. Back in Minagra, Takuto was enjoying a burger when Atu told him he should eat something healthier. Takuto laughed and said he always ate healthy but boring food in the hospital and now wanted to try something new. He also worried about Atu because she had been eating only salad for several days. Atu replied that kind of food suited her better. They talked about the rapid pace of construction, and suddenly Takuto said that after eating, Atu should call Molter and the others. He explained that their newly created scout bugs had mapped the area around their base. His plan was to do something about the nearby human settlement. First, he confirmed with Atu that the nearby town was not part of the Holy Kingdom of Qualia. Atu said it was an independent territory with a neutral alignment. Takuto was happy to hear this because it meant they could negotiate with that town. He hoped nothing bad would happen during the interaction. Krong, he believed things would be fine for now, but Atu joked that by saying that, he was jinxing everyone. Takuto laughed and said nothing like that would happen. Just then, a bug messaged him that an armed group was coming toward the forest. Takuto told Atu that if possible, they should send them back peacefully and be ready to fight if things worsened. At that moment, the armed group turned out to be none other than Lonius and Vertel's party. As they entered the forest, Vertel ordered everyone to stop because he sensed someone was approaching. Atu came out of the forest wearing black clothes that concealed her face and expression. Vertel told her to identify herself. She claimed to be a dark elf who had taken refuge in the forest with her clan because there was no other safe place for them. Vertel understood and told her to move aside because they needed to inspect the forest, but Atu replied that they shouldn't go inside. Vertel immediately sensed something was wrong, but Lonius shouted at Atu, scolding her for disobeying a servant of God's orders. Vertel snapped at Lonius, saying he shouldn't interrupt. Lonius was annoyed and asked why he was scolded over such a small matter. Vertel resumed talking to Atu and said they couldn't just turn back because she didn't want them to go into the forest. He asked if something was hidden there. Atu replied that only some elves lived there peacefully. She asked why he was so obsessed with entering this godforsaken place. After thinking a bit, Vertel revealed that the saints had a vision that something very evil was hidden in this place, and he couldn't go back without seeing it with his own eyes. The mercenaries were shocked because they hadn't known this. Lonius asked Vertel how he could casually reveal national secrets. Vertel shouted back that sometimes secrets needed to be told. This infuriated Lonius further because as a high paladin, Vertel had no authority to reveal divine prophecies without authorization from higher ups. Meanwhile, Vertel again told Atu to let them enter just a little to check. But this time, Atu's attitude suddenly changed, and she said they wouldn't find anything inside worth their time. She ordered them to leave immediately. Lonius became furious that a dark elf had the audacity to deny a prophecy of God. He felt the atmosphere around had changed and decided that something evil was indeed inside the forest that they had to investigate. But it seemed like Vertel was ready to negotiate with Atu. Vertel swore to Atu by God that there was no threat in the forest to the Holy Kingdom of Qualia. Atu swore by her God that they were more afraid of Qualia than Qualia was of them. Vertel was satisfied and announced that they were retreating. Lonius, however, couldn't believe it and said the woman was clearly hiding something. Vertel scolded him as a faithless coward and told him not to project his fears onto others. He said they found nothing, and that was the result of their investigation. Saying this, he started to turn back. But Lonius was determined not to let him decide anymore. He declared that he was revoking Vertel's high paladin authority because Vertel had revealed the prophecy to the enemy and abandoned his duty. He ordered the mercenaries to enter the forest and find out what evil was hidden there. Bargo agreed, as Lonius was their paymaster after all. Atu begged them not to go into the forest, but Lonius commanded his men to capture her. While Vertel opposed this, Atu sighed, knowing the negotiations had failed. Within seconds, the mercenaries were impaled on her spikes like fresh kebabs, and Lonius was the first to be knocked unconscious. He didn't even remember how it happened. And here the video ends for today. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode. He didn't even remember how it happened. Vertel was the only one to witness everything and still be alive. He nervously told Lonius that they were dealing with a witch. Atu immediately dropped her disguise and said the talks had been so peaceful, but unfortunately the situation had turned like this. The remaining mercenaries and Lonius were completely shaken by the scene. Vertel told Bargo to send a messenger immediately to call for help, but Bargo said all their messengers had been killed in the last attack. Smiling, Atu said that she was the very calamity they had been searching for. Laughing, she asked what they planned to do now that they had found her. While everyone else was scared and retreating, Vertel shouted at them that it was not the time to be afraid. He said they were too deep in and escape was no longer possible. He ordered his men to fight and said the situation should never have come to this. This time Atu fully agreed with him. Spits venom in her words, blaming everything on that stubborn fool who worshipped his faith above all else. Now he would have to pay the ultimate price. Verily, unwilling to waste another second, orders the archers to fire. But to Atu, deflecting arrows is nothing more than child's play. A twisted smile spreads across her face, revealing her hunger for battle. Lonius, nervous and confused, asks, "What even is a witch?" Veril answers grimly he should have revealed the truth before this mission began, even if it meant breaking protocol. Witches, he explains, are calamities foretold by saints and confirmed by the church as the greatest threat to the kingdom itself. The northern disaster, that too was the work of a witch. And the woman standing before them, Atu, was no doubt one of these monsters. Growing bored of their chatter, Atu warns them to either strike or she will. Verily quickly orders the mercenaries to retreat, declaring that only he and Lonius can stand against her. Channeling holy power into their weapons, the two paladins rush forward. Atu lashes out with writhing tentacles, confident in her dominance, yet the sanctified power burns through them, slashing one apart. Shocked, she reels back, but Verily presses on, severing another while Lonius cleaves through a second. With only two tentacles remaining, Verily believes victory is near. Enraged, Atu snatches two mercenaries as hostages, certain the paladins will hesitate, but Verily does not falter. He signals Lonius and together they strike with precision, freeing the captives while cutting down more of her limbs. Atu, for the first time, looks truly shaken. The paladins think the battle is turning in their favor. Atu's smile snaps into a lie. All along she's been weaving a trap, and now she unveils her final act. In a blur of writhing limbs, she turns Verle into a living target, spearing him through before Lonius can even react. Verle's last command is to flee, but Atu drives a tentacle through his skull and leaves him dead on the frozen ground. Then, with a cold, theatrical flourish, she claims not 6 limbs but an endless tide at her command, a revelation that crushes Lonius's hope. Realizing their defeat, he orders the mercenaries to scatter and carry one message back to the kingdom, but their retreat only stokes Atu's ire. When she sees Lonius remain, throwing himself forward in a final desperate charge, she meets him not with brute force, but with the stolen grace of a paladin. A holy blade parries his attack. Confused and reeling, Lonius hears the truth. Atu ripped Verli's sacred power, techniques, and even his memories from him. And as she drives him backward, she speaks with intimate cruelty about Verli's care for his comrades. The confession lands like a blow. Verli was not just powerful, he loved them, and that love died because of their leader's arrogance. Lonius swears that the will to fight lives on and that the message will reach the kingdom, but shouts rise around them, Atu's final betrayal revealed. Dark elves were ordered to leave no survivors. Lonius lunges in fury and collapses, consciousness slipping. Rather than end him outright, Atu hangs him upside down and pours fear and remorse into his heart, telling him how different his life would have been if he had obeyed Verla. She promises death for him there, then a slow, calculated hunt for his family and every settlement they passed. A promise not just of slaughter, but of annihilation, meant to make his last breaths fill with terror. She vows to slaughter everyone in those lands and place the entire blame on Lonius. Mockingly, Atu reminds him of his king's words. When people start looking down on you, consider your life already over. She promises to make sure no one will ever look down on her. With chilling cheer, she declares she'll massacre millions for no reason, leaving the world hating Lonius as the cause. His mind shatters completely, and all he can do is beg her to stop. But Atu only mocks him further, playfully pretending to praise him, calling him a good religious man who loved his country and family, before confessing how much she despises the self-righteous. She tells him to enjoy the view from his little seat in heaven as the slaughter unfolds below. When he pleads again, this time she tears him apart in an instant, ending his torture. Soon after, Atu stands solemnly at the edge of a cliff, lost in thought about her actions and the future. At her feet, Lonius' wedding ring lies glimmering in a pool of blood. Then Gia and several dark elves arrive, reporting that all the mercenaries have been taken care of as ordered. Satisfied, Atu decides to return, leaving the cleanup to them. Before she departs, Gia nervously asks whether she truly meant everything she said to Lonius. For a brief moment, Atu grows serious, but then her usual cheerful mask returns. With a laugh, she admits she never planned on doing any of it. After all, she's a pacifist. She was only bullying Lonius for fun. Without another word, she turns to leave, deciding to head straight for Takuto with an urgent report. Another witch has appeared in the north. This shocks them both because such a unit never existed in the game. Takuto realizes the world is no longer bound by game rules, and Atu confirms it. Some parts follow the game, but much is vastly different. Still, she insists those differences can be turned to their advantage. Takuto, however, cannot yet grasp what she truly means. Atu reveals another secret of her powers. She can not only absorb the abilities of her opponents, but fragments of their memories as well, a gift she considers far more useful. Excited, she tells Takuto that thanks to the 2 paladins she killed, she now has partial knowledge of the Qualia kingdom. At the moment, she explains, Qualia is occupied with disturbances in the north, so they are unlikely to divert much attention here. Still, the complete wipeout of a survey team will surely raise suspicion. Takuto agrees, noting that no matter what action Qualia takes, they must tread carefully. He is less worried about the kingdom's strength and far more curious about the Northern Witch. When he asks Atu what she learned from the Paladin's memories, her answer is frustratingly vague. No clear details, only that this witch had caused destruction on a military scale. Then, with a flicker of remembrance, she mentions the witch's name, Irakino, the Slurping Witch. The revelation sparks Takuto's curiosity. If a single witch could wreak havoc at such a scale, perhaps she too had crossed over from Earth, just as they had. He speculates that a witch may rival the game's hero units in power, and warns they must treat her as a potential enemy. Atu suggests otherwise, saying Irakino is likely an evil-aligned character like themselves, and perhaps they could attempt contact. But Takuto dismisses the idea, reminding her that evil-aligned species rarely coexist peacefully. Though Atu finds the situation troublesome, Takuto waves her concerns aside, insisting the witch is far away. Even if she does become an enemy, they will have time to prepare. This shifts their conversation to a pressing subject: summoning a hero. Takuto admits that while he initially considered bringing forth Issa, the Bug Queen, he now thinks it wiser to summon a more combat-oriented champion. At the same time, he believes their entire strategy needs to evolve if they are to outmaneuver the neighboring nations and secure their hold in this unfamiliar world. Takuto tells Atu that he has decided to seek friendship with an independent territory to the east. If Qualia were ever to march against them, he explains, they would need allies. Atu frowns at the thought, certain that such diplomacy will be difficult even if the eastern country is neutral. But Takuto is confident. So long as they have something of value to offer, the east will listen. For now, he says, they will strengthen their forces while sending scouts into that land. Atu agrees and sets her own plans in motion. Kaz. Far away, in another kingdom, beast folk warriors struggle against endless waves of evil monsters. The defense of their city is led by an aged yet formidable cowwoman wizard. With each surge of her spells, she obliterates an entire wave, only for another to rise in its place. The unceasing assault troubles her deeply, making her wonder what unseen hand is driving the horde. Back with Atu, as she carries out Takuto's commands, she suddenly falters. Nervously, she admits she might have gone too far with the paladins. Perhaps Takuto, a man who truly values peace, would be disappointed in her. But Takuto dismisses her fears, assuring her that nothing she does will ever displease him. For a fleeting instant, Atu no longer sees the calm strategist before her, but a shadow, the pitch-black king of ruin. Shaken yet enthralled, she bursts into song for him once more, vowing that every command he gives shall be fulfilled. Not long after, Takuto's palace is finally completed and joy lights his face. Atu shares in his excitement as they both stand before the towering structure, calling it the monument of their kingdom's beginning. Then she pauses, realizing something important. Takuto has no personal attendant of his own. The thought fills her with guilt. She immediately offers to find him a maid who will tend to his every need. Takuto gently refuses, saying it is unnecessary, but Atu insists, treating it as a matter of her pride. Curious, she presses him to describe what kind of woman he would want. Flustered, Takuto admits only that he wishes for someone he could speak to comfortably. The Dark Elves keep their distance, and he laments that it does little to help him in his dream of becoming a friendly king. Atu alone knows the truth behind Takuto's strange form, but she keeps it to herself. Instead of revealing anything, she assures him that she has a brilliant idea. Takuto, of course, already suspects that nothing good can possibly come from those words. Moments later, Malter, Gia, and Emily arrive at her summons. Without hesitation, Atu orders them to gather all the village girls and bring them here. Malter nearly panics, demanding to know why, and Atu proudly declares that Takuto likes young girls. Her twisted logic is that children can be trained to speak freely with him, and she beams with satisfaction at her plan. Takuto, horrified, feels as though she's parading him around like some cursed PDF file, but somehow, he manages to seize control of the situation. Calmly, he explains that children would serve well because they are untainted by the jaded perspectives of adults. Relief washes over the group. Takuto is not about to turn their kingdom into Epstein Island Part 2. Even Atu nods, supporting him by saying that such duties aren't difficult, so children can handle them easily. Gia immediately chimes in. If that's the case, why only bring girls? Boys could help too. Takuto answers without missing a beat, speaking like a true reformer. He insists that his vision is to train children as future leaders and, more importantly, to promote women into leadership roles. This, he claims, achieves both goals at once. The elves swallow every word, their trust deepening, and Emily lights up at the thought that their king is also a feminist. Praise follows swiftly, and Takuto finds himself pleased that he's steered this disaster into something admirable. Unfortunately, the moment the first batch of children arrive, they burst into tears at the sight of him. Displeased, Atu orders Malter to bring another group, but Malter sheepishly admits those were all the children in the village. Outraged, Atu brands him a disgrace. Then, as tension hangs in the air, Gia quietly suggests sending the twins instead. Malter instantly rejects the idea. Atu resumes the discussion, and Malter brings up the matter of two twin sisters in the village. They are intelligent, he explains, but due to certain circumstances, they are not considered fit to serve the king. Atu firmly replies that she will judge that for herself and orders him to bring the twins to her. Gia quickly interrupts, revealing that he has already summoned them. Trying to flaunt his foresight before the old geyser, Gia nearly sparks a rivalry, but Atu cuts him off sharply, saying such pointless competitions can wait. Moments later, Gia escorts the sisters inside. The younger one introduces herself as Karina, and her elder sister as Marina. One look is enough for Atu to sense the hardships they've endured. She asks Karina about the scars on her body. Karina explains they are the result of an illness, though she claims they suit her appearance. Malter adds that she once suffered from a smallpox-like disease. Though she survived, the scars remained. When Atu turns to Marina, the girl breaks down in tears, confessing that she had eaten her own mother. Both Takuto and Atu are stunned, demanding an explanation. Malter nervously clarifies their mother was a proud noblewoman who sacrificed herself for her clan. In a time of famine, the Dark Elves had been forced to choose between starvation and cannibalism, and the twins paid the ultimate price by losing their mother. Atu acknowledges the girl's fearlessness but senses something unusual about them. Suddenly, Marina steps close to Takuto, calling him pure white. Confused, he asks if she fears him. Marina shakes her head and declares she is ready to serve, convinced she can endure it. Karina, not wishing to be separated from her sister, vows to serve as well. Pleased, Takuto accepts them, and Atu officially announces the twins as servants of the king. Yet, as they leave, Malter quietly warns Takuto. Ever since their mother's death, neither sister has shed a single tear. They have locked away their hearts from the world, and Malter urges him to treat them with kindness and patience. Soon after, the twins begin their service. Marina, however, proves clumsy and accidentally spills water on Takuto. Karina quickly cleans the mess just as Atu enters. Though slightly disappointed by what she sees, she reminds Takuto that it is time for their meeting. When the council begins, Atu decides to first address construction matters. Emily, head of the department, rises and announces that since the palace is complete, the workforce is now free for new projects. Delighted, Takuto instructs Emily to begin building a clinic. Takuto's reasoning was straightforward. A clinic would safeguard the people's health, and it was the most cost-effective structure they could afford. With her orders received, Emily returned to her seat, but the reprieve didn't last. When Atu shifted the discussion to resource gathering, Emily rose again, as this too fell under her charge. She reported that using the specialized utensils and tools designed by Takuto himself, they had been collecting food and other supplies at a steady pace. Even so, she argued that it was wasteful for the king to continue performing such work personally. Atu countered firmly, pointing out that since all creation depended only on mana, their priority must be to construct facilities capable of stockpiling it faster. The meeting then turned to research. Molter stepped forward to give his report. Their project on military magic, he announced, was complete. At present, he alone could wield it, though he intended to pass the knowledge on to others. Still, he admitted it would see little use considering the king's pacifist nature. Atu nodded, agreeing that one weapon of war was enough for now, and redirected Molter's efforts toward mastering the 6 great elements, resources that would prove invaluable for the future. Discussion next shifted to military readiness. Gia stood and reported that 5 long-legged insect scouts had already joined their ranks. For the moment, they were gathering intelligence within the nation's borders, though they had not yet dared venture beyond the forest. The barren plains offered no place to hide. Atu ordered him to dispatch all scouts swiftly for reconnaissance, assuring him that with her protection, none would fall. Relieved, Gia pledged to carry out her command. At last, Atu raised the most pressing matter: summoning their next hero. Takuto spoke the name without hesitation: Isa, the Queen of Insects. The moment he did, the Dark Elves stiffened in unease. Molter hurried to reassure them. All the food and lumber needed for the ritual had already been secured. Only mana remained. With that, the council shifted to lesser concerns, and after long hours of draining debate, the meeting finally drew to an end. Once everything was settled, Takuto made his way toward the throne room, his servants trailing behind him. But on the way, Marina stumbled into him, sending a stack of documents scattering across the floor. Karina rushed to help, yet in her nervousness only tore the papers further. Takuto dismissed the accident with calm patience, assuring them it was nothing before returning to sit upon his throne. Tentatively, Marina looked up at him and asked, "Are you a bad guy?" Takuto gave a faint smile and replied, "I am aligned with evil. By that definition, yes, I am a bad guy." Confused, Marina pressed on. "Then why don't you hurt us? Why haven't you killed anyone?" Takuto hesitated, unable to fully grasp her intent, until Karina quietly explained. "She means, why does a great king like you show mercy even when we keep making mistakes?" Takuto paused, then answered simply, "Because it's a habit of mine." But the twins remained unconvinced. So, with a sigh, he decided to explain further. There's a difference between good people and bad people. Good people can only do good. They can't harm or steal from others. But bad people can do anything. They are selfish, free, and unbound. They can do both good and evil as they choose. He leaned forward, his tone softening. "And because I am a bad man, I have the freedom to forgive your mistakes." At that moment, realization struck him. The girls had been clumsy on purpose, testing whether he would punish them. When he asked if his suspicions correct, they admitted it. Takuto's expression gentled. He understood now their guilt came from failing to save their mother. "Tell me," he asked softly, "what were your mother's last words?" Marina's voice trembled. "She told us to keep living." Takuto nodded. "Then her love is what carries you still. Live in a way that would make her proud. Live freely, live meaningfully, and you will have my blessing." He placed a hand gently upon their heads, and the twins broke down at last, clinging to him as their tears finally flowed. Later, when Atu entered the throne room, she found the girls fast asleep at the king's side. A flicker of jealousy burned in her chest at how close they had grown to him, but she quickly remembered the report she had come to deliver. Guiding Takuto to another chamber, she began her briefing. There was a neutral nation to the east known as Fawn Haven, where humans and beasts lived side by side. Near the edge of the forest lay a distant town known as Dragon, a settlement under the banner of Fawn Haven. Unlike the heart of the kingdom, Dragon was governed not by nobles but by the Council of Shamans. When Takuto learned of this, he immediately saw an opportunity. Establishing diplomatic relations here on the frontier would be far easier than approaching the main capital directly. Yet, one question nagged him. Why had the town been built so far from its mother kingdom? Atu provided the answer. Rumors claimed the settlement was constructed atop a dragon vein, one of the richest sources of natural mana. To her, it was little more than an outpost for mana cultivation, but now it lay under siege, goblins and monsters relentlessly pressing against its walls, while reinforcements from the capital seemed unlikely to ever arrive. Takuto's eyes lit with calculation. If Dragon falls, its survivors will scatter, and refugees are resources, a new population we could absorb, a foothold to bring us closer to negotiating with Fawn Haven itself. Without hesitation, he ordered Atu to lead a small envoy toward the town. Their path through the forest soon brought them face to face with a group of beastmen. At the front stood a bison shaman named Tonka, flanked by wary subordinates. The moment Atu and her companions appeared, their oppressive evil aura spread like a suffocating miasma. The beastmen trembled, their instincts screaming at them to flee. Tonka, voice strained, urged them not to attack. "Stand your ground, you cannot win against them." Atu silenced her own escort of dark elves, instructing them to hold their ground while she approached the beastmen alone. But Tonka's panic deepened, tentacles unfurling, slithering toward the beastmen like hungry serpents. Just as the tension reached its peak, a foolishly cheerful human barged into the standoff. "Hi there, name's Pepe," he announced, grinning wide. "And you are?" The sheer absurdity of his attitude froze Atu in place. Stunned, she retracted her tentacles almost instinctively. Tonka, however, nearly fainted with terror, certain this strange man's antics would doom them all. But instead of disaster, Pepe's reckless warmth dissolved the hostility like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. In the conversation that followed, it was revealed that Dragon's people had also been seeking an audience with King Takuto. Tonka herself had been leading a delegation for that very purpose. Realizing the coincidence, Atu concealed her irritation and declared that their goals align. Thus, the two groups merged their paths. Pepe, ever the chatterbox, entertained everyone along the way, boasting of his wild adventures as they trekked deeper into the forest toward Dragon. Tonka apologized on Pepe's behalf, bowing her massive bison head, but Atu only waved it off, though her twitching expression made it clear Pepe's antics had already tested her patience. But when her gaze finally fell upon Takuto, she found nothing to grasp. His aura was unreadable, his presence oddly muted. Instead of clarity, she felt only unease. Perhaps they were all in far greater danger than they realized, especially Pepe, who seemed determined to test death at every turn. On their journey, this was proven when the group stumbled across a hulking troll. Pepe, ever reckless, rushed forward to fight it alone, eager to show off his skills. To everyone's shock, he actually managed to wrestle the beast down, climbing atop its back in triumph. But the victory was fleeting. The troll surged up again, swinging a massive arm. Pepe froze in terror, and only Tonka's swift intervention saved him. After driving the monster back, she roared at Pepe for his carelessness and declared his punishment. He would accompany her into the cursed forest, where they would investigate whether the monsters plaguing Dragon were spawning. Silently, Tonka cursed herself for bringing a childlike fool before the very embodiment of evil. Yet Pepe, unshaken, turned to Takuto with a bright grin and introduced himself properly. "You're strong, huh? Let's be friends." Tonka nearly collapsed from shock, rushing to cover the boy's mouth and apologize for his insolence. But to her disbelief, Takuto smiled. For the first time since arriving in this world, someone had offered him friendship. He accepted without hesitation. Atu blinked, needing a moment to process what had just happened, before congratulating Takuto on gaining his very first friend. The Dark Elves, moved by the bizarre milestone, even clapped for him. Tonka, meanwhile, stood utterly bewildered by the absurdity unfolding around her. That evening, a banquet was held in honor of the guests. Tonka marveled at the sweetness of apple juice and the gleam of the transparent glass cups, luxuries she had never seen before. Pepe, delighted, downed his portion in a single gulp and demanded more. Moments later, he vaulted onto the banquet table, flexing in front of Gia's broad shoulders, before pestering Molter with clumsy displays of magic. Takuto couldn't help but feel charmed by the extroverted fool, and yet he struggled. Diplomacy with Fonhaven was too important to be sidetracked by Pepe's antics. Still, he knew the boy's openness was a gift, an example he could use to show the beastmen that their evil king was not an enemy, but a potential ally. Suddenly, an idea strikes Takuto. He turns to Pepe and asks if he would like to play a game with him. Everyone looks confused, but Pepe eagerly agrees. They play several different games, and to Tonka's dismay, Pepe wins every single one. Excited, Pepe then tells Takuto that these games are so fun, they should be sold across the kingdom. Tonka panics at the thought, but Takuto happily agrees, since trade had already been on his mind. He thanks Pepe for bringing it up, though he quickly realizes playtime is over. Serious diplomatic talks with the beastmen must now begin. After the meal, Takuto signals Atu to open the discussion. She wastes no time and directly asks Tonka why she has brought a delegation here. Tonka grows uneasy as the true issue comes to light. She explains that their town has been under repeated attacks by barbarians aligned with evil forces, trolls, goblins, and others. They came here to investigate the cause of these assaults. Takuto immediately asks if their military strength is running thin. The question unsettles Tonka. If Takuto knew of their weakness, he could use it against them in negotiations. Quickly, she insists that for now, they can repel the invaders without much difficulty. She adds that sending two of their strongest shamans to investigate proves their confidence in their strength. They simply wish to avoid unnecessary risks. Atu nods in agreement, remarking that barbarians rarely venture near civilized lands. Everyone seems convinced, until Pepe blurts out. With careless honesty, he reveals that he had been told the investigation's true goal was to find the source of the barbarians. because if not, their city would surely fall. Tonka is left so stunned, she cannot even scold him. Atu gently reassures Tonka that they harbor no hostility toward Dragon or its people. Their only goal is to develop their own nation in peace. She explains that the barbarian threat endangers them all. If Dragon were to fall, the Horde would inevitably turn on them next. Hearing this, Tonka begins to hope for some assistance. Takuto confirms that he does indeed wish to help his friends, but Tonka, wary of diplomacy, asks what he expects in return. She knows that because of Pepe's blunders, she has already lost the upper hand in bargaining. Atu calmly answers, what they want is joint control of the Dragon Bane. Tonka is startled, for she had never even mentioned it. She admits Atu has done her research well. After a pause, Atu clarifies, they do not demand full possession, but shared control. For now, they do not need all of the mana, only the right to decide which elemental form it will be converted into. This stuns Tonka since her own people have not yet developed technology that advanced. It becomes clear Minagra is far ahead of them. Unsure whether to accept the deal, Tonka makes a bold choice. She decides to place the matter in Pepe's hands. Though she calls him a fool greater than both Goku and Luffy combined, she admits he has rare talent, and among shamans, none are better at judging character. Thus, she asks him to decide. Without hesitation, Pepe says he has wanted friendship with this nation from the very beginning. His words settle the matter. An alliance is forged between Minagra and the foreign state. Days later, Takuto calls a meeting to review the terms of the newly sealed pact. Emily explains that they will export food and toys to Dragon, receiving medals and other daily necessities in return. They will also share control of the Dragon Bane in exchange for defending against the barbarians. Molter, half amused and half worried, thanks Pepe's recklessness for making it possible, though he remains concerned about the boy. Takuto shares the same worry, but deep down he suspects Pepe's carelessness was deliberate. Perhaps the child exposed the truth not out of foolishness, but to save precious time and secure help before it was too late. The council soon resumed its discussion. Karina and Marina, curious as ever, asked about the foreign kingdom, admitting they knew nothing of it. Molter agreed, stressing that if they were to ally with another nation, they would need to learn its customs and laws. Takuto, however, had no such knowledge. After all, it hadn't been a feature of the game he once knew. He waved the concern aside for now, insisting that their priority must remain helping Dragon. Matters of diplomacy with Foreign's capital could wait until later, when a proper delegation could be dispatched. Molter pressed further, asking what official reason they would give for such a mission. Before Takuto could answer, Marina brightly suggested they go there simply to play, since Pepe had said so. Surprisingly, Takuto found merit in her words, sending a small group informally before a formal delegation might indeed win goodwill. Molter even volunteered to lead the team himself, but Takuto quickly objected, insisting that Molter was far too important. Gia agreed, pointing out that while Molter was just an old man to them, other nations would see him as a minister of magic. Molter accepted this reasoning but argued that every person in Minagra carried importance, and the best candidates for this role were the twin sisters themselves. Takuto hesitated, feeling it was far too dangerous for them. Yet Molter countered that since he was grooming them for future leadership, they needed real-world experience sooner or later. Takuto remained unconvinced, until Otto stepped forward, offering to accompany the twins to ensure their safety. Molter immediately shook his head, warning that Otto, being closest to the king, would make an even bigger political statement if she traveled abroad. With Atu withdrawing from the debate, the choice narrowed back to the sisters. The twins then approached Takuto directly, reminding him that he had once promised them freedom. Now, they wished to use that freedom by representing him in another country. He cautioned them about the risks, but they declared themselves ready. Their innocent, pleading eyes finally broke his resolve, and he agreed, much to Atu's shock, for until now, only she had ever managed to sway him so easily. Later, Atu sulked, half jealous, and teased him to forget her and begin building a harem instead. Takuto, utterly flustered, didn't know how to respond, until the twins gently advised him to be honest about his true feelings for Atu. Taking the twins' advice to heart, Takuto gently clasped Atu's hand. He thanked her for always thinking of him, admitting that without her support, he never could have come this far. Then, with quiet conviction, he told her she was the only one for him. Atu's heart swelled with joy at those words, her mind already drifting into daydreams of a blissful married life together. Takuto, meanwhile, simply felt relief that the tension had eased. Soon after, Takuto led Atu and the twins to a newly built clinic, where the bodyguards for the upcoming journey were stationed. Atu raised an eyebrow at this, curious, until Takuto explained that he had recently established special plague doctor units. When he pushed open the clinic doors, a group of masked figures hurried out to greet him. Marina's eyes widened in awe at their strange appearance, while Karina instinctively stepped back, unsettled. Yet despite their eerie masks, the doctor's cheerful demeanor shone through as they bowed with exaggerated reverence before their brilliant and powerful king. Atu, ever his most devoted admirer, was impressed by their dedication. She remarked that they were more than worthy to serve him. Takuto nodded, explaining that he had trained and prepared them long ago to handle any medical crisis, though until now they had remained on standby. Now, he declared, they would serve as the perfect bodyguards for the twins. Atu quickly agreed while the sisters exchanged uncertain glances. To ease their confusion, Takuto explained that these were medics, healers skilled in treating disease, but also capable fighters when the need arose. Atu formally assigned them their mission: to safeguard the twins during their cultural study in Dragon. The plague doctors accepted with unrestrained enthusiasm, their loud affirmations echoing through the clinic. The twins, however, could only sigh in exasperation. Their new guardian seemed far too noisy and overzealous for comfort. Pleased by their earnestness, Takuto decided it was only right to give them names. He christened them Akiro, Gyro, and Suburo. The moment he spoke the names aloud, the medics froze, trembling with emotion. To them, a name was proof of individuality, something beyond being just summoned units. Their enthusiasm swelling until even Marina began to mimic their energy. Karina, however, hung back shyly, unwilling to approach the masked figures. Atu noticed her hesitation at once. She too knew the unease of standing beside overwhelming presences. Meanwhile, far away in the town of Dragon, its mayor was in the middle of yet another tantrum. The elf woman, Antic, had once believed that abandoning her homeland for neutral territory would bring her an easier life. Instead, the workload crushed her every day. She had no time for rest, let alone the luxury of finding a partner, and the bitter thought only stoked her frustration further. Worst of all, she now had to cooperate with evil-aligned forces just to keep her people safe. As she fumed, a subordinate entered, bowing nervously. Antic instantly donned her sharp, businesslike mask and demanded to know what was needed. The woman explained that some guests had arrived, without appointment. Irritated, Antic scoffed that her time was more valuable than gold and ordered them sent away. But when the subordinate added that the visitors were from Minagra, Antic's composure cracked. She abandoned her desk immediately, rushing toward the waiting room. There, she froze. On the sofa sat two young girls, while looming behind them were three plague-masked figures radiating an unmistakable aura of evil. Antic's blood ran cold. The shamans, she thought, must have lost their minds to ally with such beings, yet protocol forced her to greet the twins politely, especially after they introduced themselves as representatives of Minagra. Antic's caution sharpened. She had heard the tales of dark elf assassins, and these masked medics looked even more suspicious. Karina noticed her unease, but before the twins could address it, Antic bowed apologetically, excusing herself for not being fully prepared to welcome them. The sisters quickly assured her it was no problem. Still, Antic's mind raced. Who in their right mind would send two children here? Then it struck her, Tonka's report. Two twin sisters raised by the Dark King himself as future leaders. Realization struck her like ice in her veins. These were no ordinary children, they were key figures in Minagra's future. If she mishandled this meeting, her entire nation could pay the price. With her pulse racing, she carefully asked the twins what had brought them to Dragon, but to her shock, they exchanged confused glances, unable to provide an answer. Jiro steps forward to answer, assuring Antic that their visit is nothing formal. He explains that Pepe had invited them simply to spend some time together, to learn about the culture and lifestyle of an allied nation. There would be no official talks yet, as the twins weren't ready for that responsibility. Hearing this, Antic feels relieved. No pressure to engage in heavy political discussions. Determined to leave a good impression, she decides to show kindness and offers to guide them through the city herself. The twins gladly accept, and Antic spends the entire day leading them through Dragon's streets, while Takuto observes everything quietly through the eyes of the medics. By evening, the girls return to their residence. Karina begins reflecting on what they had witnessed during the tour, while Marina shares how she sensed deep unease among the citizens, fear of enemies, struggles with food shortages, and a heavy weight of uncertainty. Marina, being sensitive to emotions, understands this anxiety more than most. The medics, listening to this, decide to contribute. They present a pouch they had acquired in the marketplace. Inside, Marina discovers a delicate white blossom. Karina immediately recognizes it, a poppy flower widely outlawed across the continent for its narcotic use. What disturbs her more is how fresh and flawless it appears, unlike anything found in the wild. Someone, she realizes, is cultivating this deliberately to profit from people's misery. Anger rises in Karina's chest. How could anyone exploit the suffering of innocents, especially while Antic is fighting so hard to protect her city? The medics silently resolve to remain more vigilant from now on. The following day, the twins travel to the Dragon Vein fields, where vast clusters of monorich crystals shimmer in the earth. The breathtaking sight leaves them speechless, but their awe is interrupted by the arrival of a merchant named Vesta. With a sly smile, he informs them he has heard that control of the Dragon Vein is now shared between Dragon and Managra. He proposes a business deal. Poppy grass, he claims, thrives in such mana-rich soil and sells for an immense profit. In return, he offers the twins a share of the wealth and special gifts for their king. Curious but cautious, the twins ask for more details. Vesta suggests continuing the discussion privately, handing them his address with confidence. As he walks away, he smirks, thinking how effortless it is to strike deals with those aligned to darkness. The twins were furious when they realized that the same merchant had been attempting to exploit and endanger the city. They refused to meet him and, at the end of their journey, returned to Antic. The mayor was relieved to see them and smiled, saying it was clear they had enjoyed their time in the city. She added, "Make sure the king sees me as a smart and capable mayor." Just then, Vesta appeared, flanked by his thugs. Antic froze in panic, her mind racing. "Who allowed you to come here?" she demanded. Vesta shrugged and replied coolly, "We didn't ask permission. We came in with brute force." Turning his gaze toward the twins, he asked, "So, what will you do about my previous offer since you didn't bother to meet me?" Antic's heart sank, imagining that the dark-aligned twins might have already fallen into his trap. But Karina quickly reassured her. "We had no intention of ever working with him," she said firmly. Karina then turned to Vesta and said sharply, "You should have understood that by ignoring you, we are refusing your offer." She looked back at Antic. "Is it all right if we deal with him ourselves? We won't act in a way that would harm relations between our nations." Antic's worry melted into relief. She nodded, letting them handle the crooked merchant and his thugs. Immediately, the medics positioned themselves around the twins, ready to protect them. The twins prepared for combat as Vesta pulled out a syringe filled with poppy extract. "One dose and you'll be completely addicted," he threatened. Karina and Marina glared at him. "If you touch us," Karina warned, "you'll make the entire nation of Managra your enemy, and our king won't let you die quietly." Vesta smirked. "It won't matter. After this, they'll obey every order, even your precious PDF file." He handed syringes to his men and stepped back confident. But then, chaos erupted. One of his own thugs accidentally, or intentionally, threw a sword, which flew straight at him. Panicking, Vesta spun around, and the sight that met his eyes was far more terrifying than he could have imagined. Meanwhile, back in Managra, Emily was reporting to Takuto when she asked, "Why did you assign medics as bodyguards? You could have sent your experienced warriors." Takuto smiled calmly. "These medics love humans and demi-humans. That love isn't just kindness, it empowers them. When they protect or fight alongside someone they care for, they gain extra buffs. That's why they're perfect for this mission." At Antic's office, the plague doctors had already finished off Vesta's thugs. Their skins had been stripped away, revealing the horrifying truth. They weren't humans at all, but patchwork monsters attempting to disguise themselves as people. Antic froze in terror at the sight. Marina stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Karina, calm but commanding, ordered, "Finish Vesta, he threatened us and insulted our king." Vesta tried to protest, claiming, "You're just as evil as me." Karina's eyes blazed. "Being evil means having complete freedom to do whatever you want, and I want you dead." At her command, the medics quickly eliminated him. Now, with human skins available, the three medics donned them. Marina observed, "We look human now?" Karina turned to Antic, apologetic. "Sorry for the mess and the chaos in your office. How will we pay for the cleanup?" Antic, trembling, muttered, "It's fine." Karina smiled at her relief, but Antic was even more terrified, realizing the twins hadn't been fazed at all by the gruesome scene. Overcome with fear, she accidentally peed herself. The medics, seeing this as a sign of becoming human, decided to follow suit. Before things got any more chaotic, Karina leapt forward with a precise dropkick. "Stop it now," she commanded, and the medics froze. Finally, Antic's tension broke, and she laughed hysterically. The twins returned to Managra. And here the video ends for today. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.